All right, hi guys. I really enjoyed our talk this week about some of the ways that exercise can support bike riding with some very simple, gentle, initial exercises that we kind of came up with. So I, as promised, followed up with a video, and I'm just going to kind of review some of the basics and just take you through the exercises that we did. Just some recommendations, but like I said, take it, tack it into an exercise program that works well for you, and maybe just some of the concepts, you could plug them right into anything that you're already doing. So I wanted to kind of go over core exercises, review what the core is, and maybe show you a couple of the activities. So the core consists of 3 of your deeper abdominal muscles, your transverses, 2 obliques, okay? The obliques do have attachments into the ribs, all right? They wrap around to the back of the spine, okay? You have some muscles that sit over top of that back area called your spinal extensors, your pelvic floor, and your diaphragm, okay? So that's that cylinder that we kind of want to bring all the parts together and increase that intra-abdominal pressure to create proper stability in the spine, okay? So one of the first ways to practice this is to lay down. We talked about kind of that 10th rib is in line with this bone here called your ASIS bone, okay? So your back is not flat, right? Because then the bone below would be underneath and it's not arched, okay? So it's kind of right in between. If you had a triangle on your pelvis, the triangle would be facing the ceiling, okay? So typically for a first try on an abdominal brace is we try to hold this position, okay? And you can learn it on the exhale. As you blow out your breath, you want to feel your pelvic floor drawing inward and upward. These muscles right here sort of scooping inwards and upwards, and your ribs drawing together, okay? So the first practice exercise typically when we're learning how to brace our core is to inhale and relax. As you exhale, pull all parts of the cylinder in together, hold it for 5 seconds, and then relax, okay? And so that can be done for a few minutes, all right? The next kind of awareness exercise would be to perform the abdominal brace. Things are drawn in. Remember, you're not bearing down. You want to draw in, and almost your belly button scoops underneath your ribs, okay? And then one leg lifts without moving your back, and bring it back down, okay? And then the other leg lifts without moving your back. So this is just practice on how to keep your core braced, okay? And you want to make sure one of the common things that happens sometimes is a flattening of the spine, okay? So you want to keep it in neutral. This triangle is facing toward the ceiling, okay? Shoulders are open, neck relaxed, okay? Get your abdominals braced, one leg, okay? And then the other, just really controlling the movement, okay? We talked about a hip thrust or a bridge, okay? And in this one, your core is braced, okay? And you just lift up until you're in a little flat position here, and then you come back down, okay? Watch that your knees are just staying over your toes, your shoulders remain relaxed, okay? Abdominals are braced, lift, hold for a few seconds, okay? And then relax. And you can take, if you want a little bit of extra resistance, you could take a small weight or a small dumbbell, and you can kind of place it at that area where your triangle is, okay? And you can lift and you can lower, okay? And to take that into a little further advancement, there are some weightlifting activities. It's called a hip thrust, if you want to look that up, and you can do it with a bar and a little bit more weight. It's a really good strengthener, just in general, kind of for your posterior chain. Okay, the plank is the next one we also wanted to make sure that I put in, okay? So we talked about plank for core. So when you think about setting up for the plank, elbows are underneath shoulders, okay? You want to make sure that your shoulder blades are nice and attached and active. So your chin is tilted, your neck is nice and long, sort of in that lengthened position where we talked about even in standing, okay? You want to think about kind of this area where your collarbones are as open, okay? And then if you want to move into your plank, okay, you draw in your abdominals, you maintain that spot with your shoulders, okay? You can come into a nice flat position, all right? But the abdominals are braced, pelvic floor is pulled in. I'm sort of pushing down through the palms of my hands to make sure that my shoulder blades stay attached, okay? And again, in this position, when both legs are up, okay, you want the 10th rib in line with your ASIS. The triangle of your pelvis should be relatively close to facing the floor. It might not be perfect because your shoulders are going to be a little bit higher than your heels, okay? So you can do plank holds. Just really make sure that you are thinking about drawing those abdominals in while you're doing that still and the pelvic floor, okay? We talked about a seated rotation, okay? And so for that, the idea, I would either across your arms, you could hold them out, okay? Again, it's sort of that tall through the crown of your head, okay? Try to keep the core on, so your lower abdominals are lifted, okay? Your pelvic floor is turned on, okay? Now you maintain that length as though a string were holding you up, okay? So you use your abdominals to perform a turn, okay? And you only go as far as you can without twisting your hips, okay? So if you twist your hips and one knee gets longer, then we know that you've sort of lost the neutral position that we're talking about, okay? So we're gonna rotate, okay? And then you can come to the center, and you can rotate again, okay? And at the ends, you should feel kind of a tightening in the core area. Certainly you can hold a weight with that as well, okay? And I thought I'd include one more instruction about a crunch, okay? So the idea with a crunch is still maintaining that neutral spine, okay? So your back doesn't flatten when you come into a crunch, right? We do our abdominals bracing. If you want to do it where your arms are at your side, you lift up and you're looking at your belly button with some length, nice opening in this area, okay? Holding all of those abdominals, pelvic floor together. You can reach out, okay? And you can come on back down, all right? So sometimes you can do it on an exhale and hold for a few seconds and then relax. Again, making sure that when you move up into a crunch, your back doesn't flatten. Naturally, if you're gonna do a full sit-up, your spine is going to end up rounding. But in a crunch, you really should be maintaining a neutral position, okay? All right, so a couple of the big sort of muscle group ones we talked about was performing a squat. Okay, and so the idea of the squat, again, it's always going to, when you're lifting and creating strengthening activities in the body, you want to have first just check. If you have to remember to turn your abdominals and your core on, go ahead and lift and draw that in, okay? For a squat, you're going to hinge at your hips, okay? So your spine still stays in a neutral position as you come down, okay? And then you come back up, all right? Head is nice and tall. So if I had a sort of a stick that went along my spine, okay? Let me grab it. So if I were to have a stick and the position of this would remain unchanged as I move into the squat. So if I were to hold this and squat down, my spine on the stick stays the same on the way down as well as the way up, okay? I want my knees kind of staying over my toes. If we want to get very specific, we can think about knees over the second toe, okay? All right, so again, abdominals braced. I do my squat, knees are over my toes, spine stays in neutral. I don't round out at the bottom, and then I come back up, okay? From there, if you want to take, you can hold a little weight, okay? And you can perform your squat this way, okay? You could take a dumbbell and you could hold it that way as well, okay? So that would be for the squat. If you want to make it a little simpler, if you haven't done many squats, you can always do it where you're targeting a chair or a bench, okay? But it's the same principle. I'm still going to kind of lightly touch it and then come on back up. That's a nice way to kind of start, okay? In terms of a lunge, same thing. Abdominals are braced, and I can take my little step back. So the thing to think about posture-wise, I think that would be good, of course, is maintaining that neck in that nice lengthened position, okay? I don't want to dip my hips. So as I go back, as I unweight my leg, I don't want to tip or tip this way, okay? As best I can, I want to keep my hips level throughout the entire motion, okay? As soon as one hip comes down, I'm missing a couple muscle groups, okay? Abdominals brace, that's what helps you keep that hip in the right position, okay? And again, same thing, the knee kind of tracks toward the second toe, okay? We talked about step-ups. I have a small weight just to show you on this one, but obviously you can make your height even if you wanted to go up to 18 to 20 inches, you know, but again, that's gonna directly, if you think about it, strengthening for biking, okay? So it's the same thing with the step-up that we talked about with the lunge. We don't wanna have any tipping of our hips, we wanna have them nice and level. Abdominals brace, head's nice and tall. And you just, obviously, just step up, okay? If you have dumbbells, I have these little, even just little weights, okay? You can hold them as you come into your step. And like I said, the big thing, you wanna feel your glutes on, okay? And you wanna feel that your hips stay level, okay? If this is a little bit easy and you want a little more of a challenge, you can do a little tap and back up, okay? And from a higher step, okay? Again, you wanna make sure that knee stays, you know, for being perfect, we want the knee over the second toe, okay? And not turning inwards or outwards, okay? Level hips, knee over the second toe. Okay, all right. I'm just trying to make sure there were no other other body ones. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep hold of these weights for today's purposes. So you can use, these are just little 5-pound ones. Okay, so when we talked about an overhead press, all right, so we're gonna bring our arms here. Now, the key piece of information is shoulder blades are kind of tucked down without arching my back, okay? My abdominals stay braced, and I bring them up. They can naturally come together a little bit, okay? And I'm keeping my head nice and tall as I do the movement, okay? When you look from the side, I should have a nice tall head. My abdominals are lifted, okay? And I'm simply pressing up over my head. Shoulder blades stay kind of squeezed on my back, again, without arching my back. And my arms come up and overhead, okay? Bent over row. Just as we did that posture where we bend forward a little bit, like in the squat, we're gonna kind of assume a little bit of a forward posture, okay? A forward hip flexion, okay? You can hold a dumbbell or a weight like this, all right? And it's simply shoulder blade squeeze. Make sure your head's not coming forward, head stays in neutral. It's as though if that string were pulling me here, it would be pulling me in the same direction here, okay? 10th rib stays over my ASIS, okay? And a nice row with a hold, okay? And back, all right? Okay? And then the bicep curl, okay? Same thing, tall through the crown of the head, abdominals are braced and lifted, okay? You can do one arm, okay? Or if you prefer, you can do two. You know, and your big thing is just to make sure shoulder blades are in the correct position. 10th rib is over this little ASIS here, okay? Okay. And then my tricep. So the tricep, you could be kneeling down, okay, if you want, or you can just bend forward. Shoulder blades are in the same position, okay? Abdominals are braced, okay? And simply bring it out and back in, okay? And the key again is that neck in a good position. You know, my head is tall, okay? Shoulder blades are open, 10th rib over ASIS, and abdominals lifted, okay? And then here's our tricep. So, you know, as you kind of see, the threading of the concept of that neutral spine is maintained in all of the movement patterns. You're going to brace your core, create ribs drawn together, belly button scoops up, pelvic floor is on, okay? And I'm in a neutral spine, okay? And you want to try to maintain that with all of these exercises that I kind of showed you today, okay? All right, if you guys have any more questions or any other exercises that you'd like demonstrated, just send me a message and I'd be happy to do that. All right, thanks again. Okay, bye.